Despite its obnoxiously over-memed reputation, the Pickle Rick episode is integral when exploring the topic of male mental health in Rick and Morty, and underneath the viral chaos and the rat gore, it has a surprisingly nuanced portrayal of trauma, deflection, and self-acceptance.
Well, Dr. Wong, by the way, racist name.
Rick Sanchez is a scientific god with an answer for everything, but is very ego-driven and he must remain at the top of his game, otherwise he becomes threatened very quickly.
I'm Pickle Rick! One beloved doctor!
Thanks to the peculiar fanbase, however, Pickle Rick has been canonized in meme culture as a joke, and not in a funny way if you know what I mean.
I'm Pickle Rick!
But whether you love this episode or wince at its mention, the absurdity behind it is something many can appreciate. It's an extremely creative idea, but is also written to be a masterclass in psychological avoidance. As the story goes, Rick turns himself into a pickle to avoid going to therapy, and it's an excuse so ridiculous that nobody in the family could possibly argue with, but to his surprise they see right through him, especially Beth, who takes away the conveniently placed syringe of anti-pickle serum. Rick even lies about what's in the syringe, hoping he'll be left alone.
What are you doing there, sweetie?
Well, I mean, you don't want to get pierced by a needle full of liquid unrelated to your situation. How's that going to help?
All of this just to avoid a 45-minute therapy session with his daughter and grandchildren. Honestly, credit where credit's due, because that level of commitment to avoidance is almost admirable. He's willing to do literally anything except sit down and talk about his feelings, but ultimately, this bites him in the ass, or Brian in this instance. I don't fucking know. When everything goes wrong, Rick is luckily self-sufficient enough to survive, and whilst this violent escapade with roaches and rats goes on, the family attends their first session with Dr. Wong. Voiced by Susan Sarandon, this is her first appearance and she's arguably one of the show's best written side characters. Her calm nature is disarming, where she outright refuses to play into Rick's hand, and what's great about this angle is how the show doesn't undercut her. She's not mocked. In fact, I'd say the audience is meant to side with her, which is very unusual in a show where cynicism often wins. It's also worth noting that Dr. Wong isn't some magical fixer. She doesn't cure Rick, or anybody for that matter. Instead, she observes and names the problems.
You like it when people think you're cool?
You're extra analytical today. Looking to remodel your kitchen?
Even when he's not present in the room, Rick is still the main topic of conversation, which is somewhat ironic, especially with Beth and Jerry's separation being a prominent story beat around this time in the series, choosing her father over her husband. And it's obvious that Morty and Summer don't want to be there, and Beth is very guarded about sharing her feelings with a stranger. Like father, like daughter, she also has an inflated ego, and I like how she's very envious of her father being so self-sufficient. Rick doesn't depend on anybody, and that's what she aspires to be like. In many ways, the Space Beth character introduced later down the line is a way of showing her a what-if scenario of what this would be like, amongst other things that maybe we'll cover in another video. It's funny how even in pickle form, Rick's behaviour doesn't change. His theatrics are for his own amusement, such as celebrating victory over murdering the sewer rats, and this is done with cliché monologuing, saying lines like "God damn, I love myself," which just further contribute to his ego problem. When he does eventually show up to therapy, it's not to confront his feelings. He asks Beth for the serum so that he won't die, but is then coaxed into taking part in the group session. Distracted by Dr. Wong's unfazed approach, I like how she immediately calls him out for lying to his daughter about what the serum is.
Rick, why did you lie to your daughter?
So I wouldn't have to come here.
Why didn't you want to come here?
Because I don't respect therapy. Because I'm a scientist.
She understands more about Rick than he realizes, where he continues to deflect, belittling therapy, saying that he's above it. He makes this point by saying he doesn't agree with it because he's a man of science. Therefore, he sees positive change in absolutes. If he doesn't like something about the world, he'll change it. His fragile perception of discussing his feelings and rationalizing his own inner conflict will not make him feel any better. And we see this idea presented much later down the line, where he's preparing to face off against his nemesis Rick Prime. He decides that he won't benefit from therapy since it doesn't involve the attributes he associates with science. I'd arguably say this entire sequence borders on an uncomfortable truth, and it's made worse when Dr. Wong holds up a metaphorical mirror to Rick, showing just how crazy the lengths became just to avoid therapy.
You are the master of your universe, and yet you are dripping with rat blood and feces, your enormous mind literally vegetating by your own hand.
Intelligence is a gift, but shouldn't be used as an excuse to avoid things we don't like.
Intelligence is not a privilege, it's a gift. And you use it for the good of mankind.
Like it or not, as people, we need to maintain our health and retain a source of happiness. In order to achieve this, sadly we must do things that we may not feel inclined to do, but we do them anyway to get to where we need to be.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
I like how the Pickle Rick episode makes an excellent foundation for how the show approaches therapy. It's not a joke, but is instead treated as a confrontation. Some may think of it as a fix, but I feel it's more of a tool to be used by someone who's willing to strive for self-improvement. And with Rick, for all his genius, he hates this introspective tool. He knows exactly what he'll see and will do anything like turn himself into a pickle in order to avoid it. It's no surprise that Rick is painfully aware of his flaws such as abandonment issues, addiction, narcissism, self-hatred. The list goes on, and he weaponizes humor and his intellect as armor. He's not a hero or a villain, but simply a man running from the void. And therapy is the one room where the void catches up to him, and this is a recurring motif throughout the show, avoiding help and being afraid of accepting the truth.
Hey Rick, Unity. Look, cards on the table. I heard you were going after that guy again. Just made me worried. Give me a call.
Entrapment is a recurring psychological pattern on the show, both physically and emotionally, but let's focus on the latter. We've seen Rick's self-destructive tendencies across the series, but when he creates a problem he cannot solve, this is extremely rare. I think this is best shown where he rekindles a romance with Unity, a hive-mind alien. He doesn't realize that their shared passion is what Unity is all about, assimilation and control. And sadly, their shared behavior leads to self-destruction, especially for Rick, who even goes as far as abandoning his grandkids to stay with her. And sadly, they're just too similar and bring out the worst in each other. Some relationships are like this, and unfortunately some people take the coward's way out, leaving a note or a message from a distance. And it's interesting how Unity tells Rick that he cannot change when this is simply not true. It may be slow, painful, and somewhat inconsistent, but Rick has started to change over time. He's more accepting of his flaws and open to empathizing with those closest to him. You could say it's unexpected when these moments of clarity do occur, but Rick genuinely does care about his friends and family. Perhaps he just wasn't quite sure how to express these feelings? He isn't looking for redemption, but warms up to the idea of the truth and being truthful with yourself. We've established Rick's psyche and how he's constantly running from his emotional turmoil, and continuing to explore his association with therapy. One of my all-time favorite episodes is Analyse Piss.
What the hell?
How about a little piss?
3 seasons later, Rick now willingly enters the world of therapy. He's fed up with attracting bottom-of-the-barrel supervillains and seeks Dr. Wong's advice about ignoring them, just to see if they will leave him alone. He wants to prove her wrong, but is instead surprised by the results actually working to improve his situation. There's a lot to appreciate about this story and how Rick walks in his enemy's footsteps. Choosing to ignore a petty villain who calls himself Pissmaster, Jerry gets all the credit for fighting this Green Goblin wannabe. And by not getting involved, Rick is no longer a target because nobody has been able to get a rise out of him. And he then sees the humiliation caused by the viral videos of Pissmaster being stripped of his golden powers, which unlocks a rare feeling of empathy in Rick. He then goes to track him down with the intention of sharing a few drinks, maybe even befriending his new bladder bro, but is then saddened to find it's too late.
God damn it!
Why were these villains going after Rick in the first place? Well, they just wanted attention, to feel something. And Rick was feeding into that, and the tragedy behind Pissmaster is how the show humanizes this throwaway character by suddenly making things feel more personal. These feelings get heavier and more apparent when his daughter turns up, concerned about her dad's well-being. And props to the voiceover performance in this scene because his daughter's cries are devastatingly real. Rick then takes on the role of the Pissmaster, and I like how this whole storyline literally boils down to a pissing contest, focusing on both ego and validation. And these D-tier villains just want fame for having fought with Rick Sanchez, who's viewed as a big deal of sorts. and he slowly realizes that it's no longer about him, that Dr. Wong was indeed right. She's oddly supportive of Rick's plan to redeem Pissmaster's public image, describing this activity as healthy, and this allows him to distance himself from being a target and walk in his enemy's shoes.
I am Pissmaster!
Playing the long game, Air Force Wong sees a new side to Rick. He's slowly unlearning his worst habits and is now voluntarily attending therapy sessions with Dr. Wong. He's comfortable asking for help and actively looks to work on himself. And when Rick's past relationship with Unity resurfaces, this is a past trauma that he feels more comfortable dealing with now than he would have before. Unity returns because she's worried about Rick going after Rick Prime, but he openly rejects her due to the harsh breakup. I honestly didn't think much of this episode as a standalone piece, but when looking at Rick's progress with therapy, it's great to see how he confronts his past. Furthermore, it shows how Dr. Wong was right, further validating her character as a necessary part of Rick's life outside of the family. That's going to do it for this exploration video looking at Rick and Morty's portrayal of mental health and therapy. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, please do leave me a like down below. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a follow-up video on this topic or if there's any other subject matter from the show you'd like to hear me discuss. And for more videos, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, DVD Review Studios.
Are you threatening me?